This call is now being recorded.
Cliff, it's so good to hear from you.
Great to talk to you too.
How are you doing?
I am doing very well, keeping very busy these days.
Just so that I have it right, your last name is pronounced garstang?
Garstang, yes. Mustang,
Okay. All right, cool.
only with Gar.
All right, excellent. So Cliff Garstang. And so this is the 26th episode of Evening Magic, and I'm just doing audio this season. I wanted to try something a little bit different. And I'm so glad that you're on because you have got your second novel out, right?
It's actually my third novel.
Okay, I thought the first one was a collection of stories.
Well, I have 3 collections of stories and 3 novels.
Okay, all right. I am sorry about that. So what are your 3 novels?
The 3 novels, the first one came out in 2019. It's called The Shaman of Turtle Valley. And the second one is called Oliver's Travels, which came out in 2021. Right. And then The Last Bird of Paradise just came out 2 weeks ago.
Okay, wow. I didn't realize you had 3 novels. How do you write them so fast?
Well, people say that because they seem to have come out all at the same time or within a short period of time. But the other books were done a long time ago. It just took such a long time to get them published. So The Shaman of Turtle Valley was actually finished originally in 2011 and didn't come out until 2019. The Oliver's Travels was finished in 2016 and came out in 2021. And I've been working on this novel since 2016. So.
All right. Okay. Full disclosure, I was talking to Shuli, and I think you and she were on Shuli Kaywood, who's also a writer. You and she were on a panel a few years ago, correct?
We did something together, and I think we had books coming out at the same time, so we did a Zoom thing, I think.
All right, and she was telling me about it, and she talked about, so I think someone asked both of you how to write a novel, or how do you write a novel, and she was very intuitive and feeling oriented, and you had a structure. Is that correct? Am I remembering that right?
I don't remember that discussion, but I think that's probably accurate. When I'm facing a novel project, I do feel like I have to know where it's going. And so I have not the world's longest outline, but I do have a bit of an outline so that I have an idea of what's coming. And of course, in the process of writing it, things change, but I do like to know where it's going.
Do you do all of this on the computer, or do you do any handwriting?
I do it all on the computer.
All right. Now, okay, so you were a lawyer for many years before you became a writer, correct?
Right.
Had you always wanted to be a writer, or is it something that you decided to do later in life?
Well, both. Yeah. So I always wanted to be a writer. I went to college with that in mind, thinking that I would be writing great literature right off the bat, and then I had no idea how to do that. I also was not an English major, so I had not read enough, so I decided to start a master's degree in English so that I could read more. And I had never heard of an MFA program at the time, so that's why I was working on a master's in English. But then I got sidetracked by international travel. I joined the Peace Corps, and that was such a turning point in my life that I decided I needed to do something that would give me an international career. So anyway, 20 years later, I finally decided that it was time to pursue writing.
Okay, so All right, that's a really interesting story. What was your first foray into writing when you decided to pursue it in earnest?
I was uh, I was living in Washington D.C. and I was working at the World Bank in the legal department there, and started to dabble in a novel. And I took some classes. There's something called the Writers Center, which is in Bethesda, Maryland, a suburb of DC. And so I took some classes there and managed to write a whole novel over the course of several years. And that gave me the courage to get serious about it. So when I finished that, I decided to quit my job actually and start an MFA program and see if I could learn how to really do it.
All right. You take a lot of walks. You post about your walks, or you used to post about them. Are you still walking a lot?
I guess not as much as I used to, but spring is coming, so I think I'll be getting back to it, yes.
And you had lost a lot of weight when you started walking, right?
That was a few years ago. I put a lot of it back on, unfortunately.
Okay. Do you count your steps, or do you go for a certain amount of time?
A little of both. I mean, I do have, a Fitbit, so the steps are counted, and but I walk for as long as I want to.
When you're on the walks, do you think about your novels?
Often I do. So I remember many times I would go for a walk with the intention of solving a problem in the writing, and it's very useful to do that. I find the walking to be really an important part of thinking about the work, and it's not the same on a treadmill. I mean, I go to a gym and walk on a treadmill, and it's just not the same. So walking in nature is really what I need to be doing. And sometimes I'll be walking and not thinking about a particular problem, but it will just come up in my thoughts, and it will be great. Something will resolve itself.
I have thought of titles while walking, and I was writing a novel a few years ago, and I couldn't think of the name of it, or maybe I couldn't decide what I wanted the novel to be about. And this was a mystery novel that I wrote that I haven't published yet. And I was jogging, and then the idea came to me, and I thought, oh, that's what I'll do. And then I was able to write the whole novel based on that idea. And then since then, I got older, I got running injuries, and I decided I was no longer going to run, I was going to walk. And part of me wondered, what if I can't think of ideas because I'm not jogging anymore? But I have come up with ideas while walking, so no problem there. Do you think that that's the main way to solve a problem for a writer? Because writers have talked about walking they've written about it in their journals. They have talked about the writer's walk for years. What do you think the connection is between the two?
That's a really good question. I don't really know, except that it does take your mind in a different direction just for a little while to get started, right? And especially because you're paying attention to what's going on around you, and especially when I live out in the country, so I'm walking on these country roads and looking at the cows and the other animals, and so I think that distraction is a great way of letting your subconscious come up with answers to these questions.
I'm glad that you mentioned subconscious. Do you think I think sometimes when we get into subconscious and when people talk about the subconscious, they kind of bleed into spirituality. Do you think there is any connection between spirituality and writing?
Well, in a way, I suppose there is. I mean, if one is really into the writing, you're connecting with something inside yourself that might be called spiritual. Um, I long for the days when it's going so well that I'm able to shut everything else out and really focus on the words. And so I think maybe in an ideal situation, it's spiritual. The rest of the time, it's just work.
I think that's flow state when you shut everything else out, and it's become scientific. Truman Capote used to call it a trance, so you probably thought of it as more spiritual. And do you know who the writing guru is, Natalie Goldberg?
Sure.
Okay, she did an interview with a podcast called the Paul Leslie Hour, and he asked her what the best thing about being Natalie Goldberg was. And you know what she said, Cliff?
No.
She said, dropping Natalie Goldberg. and it made me laugh because it was so out there. She said, and he said, can you explain that? She said, the old yellow coat of myself. And so I think that's, she's a practicing Buddhist for many years and sat with a couple of Zen masters. The one I can remember the name, the one whose name I can pronounce is Katagiri. The other one, he's very famous and he just died a couple of years ago, but I can never pronounce his name. He's got 3 names. Do you know that monk I'm talking about?
Yeah, the Vietnamese monk. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it. I'll learn it and then I forget. But she also studied with him, so she kind of gets into the zone and gets into the trance and stuff. And I thought that was pretty cool. How did you feel? Did you feel like there was a spiritual component when you were in the MFA program? We went to the same MFA program. We were in different cohorts, but people still talked about Cliff when I was there. Did you think there was a spiritual aspect to it when you were there?
That's really interesting. In a way, yes, because I was pursuing something that I really wanted to do, and the successful writers who were the teachers in that program were like gurus in a way. You look to them for guidance, and I think that they all treated it seriously with an element of fun, but it was a bit like meditation practice, which I've also done from time to time, but learning from them was a lot like learning from a monk, I guess. So yeah, a bit spiritual.
I remember, did you ever take a class with Patricia Powell?
Yes.
Okay, I remember the first time when she had us close our eyes and imagine connecting to the unconscious. She always called it the unconscious. Maybe that's the way Jamaicans refer to the subconscious. You know how like in different countries they'll refer to the same thing but with a different word?
Sure.
Yeah, like in America, I think we say the collective subconscious or something, and she would say the collective unconscious. That could be a Californian thing because she's a little bit more Californian now than Jamaican. But she told us to relax and try to tap into the collective unconscious. And she said, now relax. And she's doing the breathing stuff. And she said, now try to relax your anus. If you can relax your anus, then you are very relaxed. And of course, then we all started laughing. Did she do that with y'all?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that. The main thing I remember about working with Patricia, she was in my last semester. And by that time I had switched to writing short stories instead of working on my novel. And, one of the nicest things anybody has ever said to me about one of my stories is when she called a story of mine delicious, which I love.
What do you think she was talking about when she said that?
Well, it's a fairly unusual story. It's included in my first collection of stories, and it's about a young man whose partner has recently died, but he seems to be able to communicate with him through the antique furniture that he has inherited and is now trying to sell. So I think it was just a pretty unusual story, an interesting setup, and so I think that she liked that.
I've read a couple of her novels. They're very good. And she likes to write about gay men. A Small Gathering of Bones was about the burgeoning AIDS crisis in Jamaica. And then she wrote The Pagoda, which came out in 1999, which is technically not about gay men. It's about gay women. And it was before there was the language of the trans community. So the main character is living life as a man. And then his name is Mr. Lowe. Then he transitions through the course of the novel. This is a spoiler alert, but this is a delicious novel. I think you could enjoy it even knowing this. He transitions back to being a woman through the course of the novel, and he's still referred to as Mr. Lowe. And I thought, wow, this is so edgy. This is when it was organic and kind of cool. And I recommend it. It's called The Pagoda if you haven't read it.
Sounds good.
Have you ever heard of it before?
Yeah, in fact, I don't think I read the other one, but I did read The Pagoda. So.
Yeah, very cool. So I'm glad I didn't spoil it for you. I spoiled it to anybody that's listening, and it'll get a lot of listens, but I recommend it, and it was pretty cool. I read The Shaman of Turtle Valley, and that one that was pre-pandemic. No, it was in the middle of the pandemic when it came out.
No, it came out before the pandemic, so 2019.
Okay, I was reading it in 2020. That's what it was. There was a man who married a lady from Korea. Is that what happened in the book?
Right.
Okay, your stories, are they all made up? Are they some based in your life? Because it seems like you're writing from a lot of different points of view.
Well, it's all made up, but I would have a very hard time not drawing on my personal experience, both in creating the stories, the plots of these stories, and also in creating the characters. So, it's a good mix of reality-based and then entirely imaginary stuff.
There's a big trend now, at least the writing people that I have fallen into with, of writing your real life and presenting it as fiction. Well, it's called autofiction, autobiography and fiction. Joyce Carol Oates dragged it on Twitter one time, and then all the autofiction people were coming after her. It was a thing. And to me, when I read autofiction, it feels like memoir. But I think there are certain decisions that get made that make it more fictional. There's also, it might have even come from Truman Capote. He might have been the first person to do it with In Cold Blood. Maybe that's where it stems from. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've encountered autofiction for quite a while. I think there's a difference between autofiction and merely using your experience to enhance your imagination, or to ground your imagination in something that's real and relatable. Um, but I remember being at a writers conference many years ago when people were talking about autofiction, and I just don't really get it. Write a memoir if that's what you want to do. But of course, I can't say that I've gotten into serious trouble, including real life details, because I do change things substantially. But it is kind of interesting if somebody thinks that they're included in your work. Yeah. But as I said, it's really inevitable. My first collection of stories, I started writing at the end of the MFA program. I had recently moved to this small town in Virginia where I live, and my eyes were wide open to things that were so different to me because I'd always lived in cities before. And so inevitably I was struck by the stories and the images and the characters I was seeing all around me, including things that I would read in the newspaper. So not everything was something that was happening in my own life, but it was something I was observing from life. And then other pieces were, I would say, more inspired by my own life. So since you mentioned the Shaman of Turtle Valley, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in South Korea for 2 years and saw a lot of relationships and sort of had a relationship between Americans and Koreans, and thought it was an interesting structure for demonstrating the differences between cultures, coming at things from different angles, because that's really what that book is about. And so that's, I didn't borrow any particular people for that, but I did borrow some settings that were quite familiar to me.
I think that I'd known that you'd gone to Korea or spent time there, and so I think that's what drew me to the book. And also it was your first novel, I think.
Right.
I think I want to read that. So when you sit down to write, what's a writing day like for you? What's a writing routine like for you?
When I am creating new work, as opposed to editing, I try to come to the desk fairly early with my cup of coffee and try to shut everything else out, which gets harder and harder. But I try to spend the entire morning creating new work and reserve the rest of the day for whatever other tasks I'm facing, including going back and revising and editing, or maybe, the business side, sending work out to agents or editors or whoever, or currently working on promoting the new book. So, but the morning I try to reserve for writing.
This might be the same answer, or it could be two different ones. What's the best piece of writing advice that you learned from the MFA program, and what's the best piece of writing advice that you could give to anyone that wants to write? Well,
it feels like it's sort of trite at this point, but don't give up is what I learned from the MFA program. And sadly, a lot of our peers do give up, but I think if they keep working at it, that ultimately they will find an outlet for their creative voice. So, I always tell other writers just to persevere, keep working at it. What was the other half of your question?
I mean, what was the best, what you learned from the MFA, the best piece of writing advice, and what advice do you have to give?
Yeah, so I think that's really it. I mean, I could also on a micro level, I've had the good fortune of working with Elizabeth Strout in one of my semesters, and
Yes.
she is such a great teacher of the sentence, and more than that, of course, but I will always remember her focusing on sentences and how they can be made both true and powerful by cutting away the stuff that's not needed in the sentence, what she calls twigs, words and phrases that really detract from what you're trying to do with the sentence.
What's a twig? What would you give an example of a twig?
A twig would be, I do this all the time. I'll write a perfectly good sentence, and then I'll add, comma and another phrase or another clause when the original sentence did everything that I wanted it to do without that extra wording. So you cut off that prepositional phrase or whatever it is, and you've got a much stronger sentence.
Elizabeth writes by hand on loose leaf paper, and then she types it up. Did you know that she did that?
I didn't remember that she did that. I certainly have known other writers who do that. I've not studied with, but I have talked to a couple of times Lee Smith, and she does that also. It's pretty old school, but my handwriting is so bad that I just can't do that.
There was Natalie Goldberg, of course, writes by hand, but she reads everything that Elizabeth Strout publishes, and I have been reading everything that Elizabeth Strout publishes. She's kind of prolific, and I loved O. William. Did you read that one?
I have. So I've read all of her books. I'm looking forward to her new one, which is coming out soon. And O. William, which is part of the Lucy series of books, was quite good. I also liked Lucy by the Sea, I think it's called. And when we were studying with her, when I was studying with her way back when, it didn't seem like she was all that prolific. Olive Kitteridge had not come out yet, so she was still getting by. I think she only had 2 novels at that point. And then it took a while for Olive Kitteridge to come out, and then it was still quite a few years before the next one, I think, the next book. But suddenly, the last several years, it's been almost a book a year, so it's kind of crazy.
I guess now that she has the Pulitzer, she can write whatever she wants to, and they'll publish it.
Well,
so that's kind of helpful.
I'm sure that's true. So I remember when my first story collection was coming out, I emailed her and asked her if she would provide a blurb, and she agreed to do that, which was wonderful. And then she sent me the blurb, and it was great. And then I think it was 1 week later when she won the Pulitzer Prize. So the value of my blurb went up considerably.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Do you think it helped sell books?
Yeah, probably. I think, with that name on the back cover, of course, that book was also blurbed by Tim O'Brien, so I had a couple of powerhouses on that book. But yeah, I don't know about blurbs, but if a name is so recognizable like theirs, it must help.
Cliff, we're winding up, so I just have a couple of more questions. You seem like a very mysterious person. And I've talked to other writers, and they'll say, I don't know anything about Cliff. But there's an intimacy, like when you share your walk on Facebook and things like that. how do you feel about being a mysterious person or a mysterious figure? And what is the most revealing thing that you'd be willing to say on Evening Magic about yourself?
Wow, mysterious. I like that actually. I don't think it's true, but I like it. So something that's revealing. I live alone and I'm very happy living alone. I don't even really like to have guests in the house. So, whatever that says about me, I don't mind socializing with people outside of the house, but I don't want to live with them. So that's me. That's pretty revealing.
Speaking of socializing, are you going to go to the Queen's reunion in April?
I'm not able to go to that, no. Are you?
I'm going, but just for the reception on Saturday. I rented an Airbnb, and it's going to be a tiny house. I've been obsessed with tiny homes, and I look at reels of them and YouTube videos of them, and so I'm like, I'm just going to stay in one and get it out of my system. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, that sounds fun. I've done Airbnbs mostly in Europe, and sometimes, although they're apartments, they're pretty tiny sometimes. So.
All right. So I mentioned the Paul Leslie Hour before. That's a cool podcast out of Charleston. He used to be on the radio in Atlanta. He even actually used to be on satellite radio. He hosted different segments on Margaritaville on that station. But now he's based in Charleston, and his show is just a podcast. But very cool podcast. He always gives the ending of his show over to the guest so that the guest can say whatever he wants to, knowing that for the potential for thousands of people across the world could hear what the guest has to say. So with that being said, Cliff, I want to turn the show over to you to take it over and say whatever you want to.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. I am very excited right now because of my new book. So I'm going to spend a second or two talking about that. The Last Bird of Paradise is the name of this novel, and it's set in Singapore, where I lived for almost 10 years. And it really reveals a lot of what I learned about Singapore, both contemporary and historically. It deals with terrorism around the world, but especially in Southeast Asia. But it also deals with colonialism and the consequences of exploitation by the West of less developed countries and the colonial influences in Singapore dating back to the early 19th century. So that's what I'm excited about right now, and that's what I tend to be talking about with everybody I see. So that's my message.
All right, you heard it here. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Cliff. I really appreciated the time to talk to you. The times that we have spoken briefly, like in the elevator at AWP or at Queen's reunion, I've always enjoyed it. So I'm happy that we had a longer forum.
And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.